hey, it's another episode of the Raising Sons podcast. This episode is very sensitive. The topic of this episode is very sensitive, and I know will be very sensitive to a lot of moms because it's not something that they often say out loud. So today we're talking about when a mom is afraid of her son. And so this fear could be for a lot of different reasons. And so before I get into the episode, I just want to let you know that usually you don't see me. I usually don't have notes when I'm recording the episode. But for this particular episode, I have notes. So if you see me looking down, it is because I'm looking at my notes because I want to make sure that I cover the breadth of all that is entailed with this topic. So let's get into it. When a mom is afraid of her son, where does that fear even come from? Sometimes, a mom may be afraid of her son's anger. Maybe his anger is explosive and she's afraid of his anger. Maybe she's afraid of how quickly he escalates. Maybe he goes from 0 to 100. Maybe she's afraid of his size. Maybe she's afraid of what he might become. And so a couple of episodes back, I talked about how a mom's childhood or maybe even her trauma is affected by how she parents. So her childhood trauma and experiences impact how she parents. And so maybe she's afraid of what her son might become because maybe she's not seen any positive men in her life or had any positive experiences. And then not only is there fear, but there's also shame because just like I said, this isn't a topic that a lot of moms will say out loud that I'm scared of my son. So there's a level of shame that comes with even just saying it out loud. Because then she has to ask herself, what kind of mom am I to be afraid of my child? And so we're going to talk about it. Not to judge. This is not this is a judge-free zone. Not to dramatize, but to restore perspective and leadership. And so where did this conversation come up? I've talked to many moms over the years. I work with many moms in a variety of different situations. And a recent conversation I had with a mom who was telling me that she was afraid of her elementary age son. And she, describes his anger as intense, his reactions as big, his presence as physically intimidating. She said, he weighs 100 and something pounds. She was like, and he's strong. He's stronger than me. And I said, well, now mind you, both of my sons, so this is why I could understand where she's coming from. Both of my sons are in that same weight category, right? My 11-year-old and my 14-year-old. And so I said, he's not stronger than you yet. Right? Because I understand, puberty, testosterone, all the things. And so her elementary age son is not stronger than her yet. I wasn't dismissing her fear. I wanted her to understand. And I wanted her to understand not just because I'm, as this professional, but I'm a mom to boys too. So I'm not just saying something just to say it. And so I wanted also to remind her of the fact that he's still a child. He's only 10 years old. You're still the authority and the leadership window is still open because in that conversation, I feel like she was saying he's stronger than me and I have no power in this situation. And her son was having some behavioral issues. And so that's why we were working together. And so what I heard her say when she said he's stronger than me is that she was relinquishing her power, her control. And I was like, no. But fear oftentimes has a way of distorting reality. So let's talk about why moms feel afraid. So maybe moms are afraid because their son's anger feels unpredictable. Maybe it's because Moms are feeling emotionally overwhelmed. Maybe it's because they don't know how to de-escalate situations. Or again, maybe it's because of their own trauma history. Maybe they see, their son's strength increasing and they have this feel or this need to control the situation, and so they can't change their son's strength or him growing or getting bigger. So that's their need to control is really rooted in fear. And so sometimes fear shows up when influence feels shaky. Like when you feel like you're losing ground, then fear is a cover for that. When you feel like you're losing ground, fear shows up because it's like, oh. And so this is what it does to parenting. We react instead of leading. We avoid instead of correcting, which I've seen that time and time again. To avoid conflict or confrontation, they just give in. They just allow for tantrums, or they just don't correct the behavior because it's easier to just avoid, or there's a fear of their son, so they just don't correct. Maybe they over control instead of guide. So their reactions, a mom's reactions to things, are so over the top, and that's masking the fear that they feel to maintain that sense of control. Or there's just a shutdown altogether. You say nothing, you do nothing, you see nothing, you just withdraw. But fear is not leadership. And so this is why I talk about starting with the end in mind. One way to avoid getting to this place of fear is laying that foundation early. When your son, when you're birthing a boy, start thinking then about what kind of man you want him to become. And I know that's kind of hard to think about because, maybe he's not here yet or he's a baby, but I want you to start thinking about, if you find yourself in that situation, think about what kind of man you want your son to become, because you got to reverse engineer and start laying that foundation when they're toddlers, so that when they get to manhood, all of the things that you wanted to see, you've put in them, you've laid the groundwork way back when. And so that's why I always say, start with the end in mind, because the truth is, your son is going to be stronger. He's going to be bigger and he's going to be taller than you at some point. And so when you lay that foundation, that fear doesn't have to come in because the foundation is laid. When I talk about the foundation, I'm talking about boundaries and consistency and follow through and discipline on the things that you say. I worked with another mom whose son at the time was 4 or 5. Mom was working a lot and she worked opposite of the dad. So dad would dealt with the kids more during, I think, the day. Mom worked at night. And so, dad was, son was doing things, so he'd be on punishment. But when mom came home, she would undo the punishment because she felt guilty about not being there. And she was like, I just want to spend time with him, and I just want to love on him, and I just don't want to put him, I don't want to have him on punishment. And I said, I understand that. I said, but, because he was having behavior issues at school. And so I said, Mom, the inconsistency in parenting is showing up at school. And are you okay with him doing these things when he's 9 or 10 or 11 or 12? Because then we dealing with some other stuff. When I say 9 or 10, I'm like, the older they are, that you allow these things to just kind of go on, the harder it is to correct. And so I said, are you okay with that? And she said, no, I really hadn't thought about then. I'm just focused on now. And she said, okay, I know I need to do better. I'm gonna work on being more consistent. And so I'm sharing that because I think oftentimes as moms, we are doing all the things right now today without giving a lot of thought to later, right? Because we just got to get through today, or there's so much on our plates. And so I want you all to start thinking about starting with the end in mind. The things that you're doing now, the discipline, the correcting, the relationship, what is the foundation that you're laying now? Because it's coming, and it's coming fast. Trust me, because my son is, well, I have a middle schooler and I have a high schooler, and I will tell you that it came quick. And so you don't want to parent primarily through physical authority, because it only lasts but for so long. So again, you want to parent through relationship, through influence, through respect, through emotional safety, and through internal discipline. So what are you building now before that day comes? Are you building fear-based obedience, or are you building self-regulation? Are you building power struggles, or are you building respect? Now, let's make a distinction. Some boys are strong-willed, some boys are loud, some boys are physically expressive, some boys are emotionally intense. Intensity, though, is not the same as danger, but unmanaged power can become destructive. Your job is not to shrink his strength. Your job is to teach him how to steward it. Because strength without guidance becomes intimidation. Strength with character becomes leadership. So if you're afraid right now, if you're listening and you're thinking, I don't like admitting this, but I felt afraid, here are a few things that I want you to do. One, I want you to regulate yourself first. A dysregulated parent cannot calm a dysregulated child. So I want you to lower your voice. I want you to slow your breathing, and I want you to create space. Two, I want you to reclaim your authority calmly. You don't need to yell to lead. Calm firmness is more powerful than loud control. Third, I want you to teach language for anger. Many boys, we know boys don't like emotion. They like vocabulary. Give him words before consequences. I feel frustrated. I feel embarrassed. I feel hurt. 4, separate the behavior from the identity. He is not dangerous. He is learning how to manage power. So just because he does something doesn't mean that's who he is. And 5, seek support if safety is genuinely at risk. So if there's a physical aggression that threatens harm, that requires professional intervention. Strength is shaped when addressed early. Strength is shaped best when addressed early. So this is what I want you to do. We're going to do a reframe. Instead of saying, I'm afraid of my son, try saying, my son is learning how to handle power. And I'm still shaping that learning. Because right now, at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you still have access. You still have influence. You still have the ability to build regulation, empathy, and respect. And even if those things aren't in place today, you still have time to correct those things. Now, you don't want to wait till 13, and you really don't want to wait till 12. And with the way puberty is coming on sooner, you really want to start as early as possible. But if you find yourself and your son is 11 or 12, you still have access. You just have to be committed to the process, because it's hard to undo. I won't say it is hard. It's challenging to undo behaviors that have existed for so long, that have been allowed to exist for so long. So it takes a real commitment and maybe even some assistance, some help. Because when he's 17, you do not want to start teaching him how to manage anger. You want to reinforce what was already built. If you have felt fear, you're not a bad mother. You are a mother who needs support, strategy, and grounding. You don't need guilt. You need tools. And you need to remember, your son is not your opponent. He is becoming a young man, and you are shaping how that man will handle power. So I want you to start with the end in mind. I want you to picture him at 25. How does he respond when he's angry? How does he treat women? How does he handle frustration? How does he carry strength? That version of him is being built in moments like this, not through panic, through leadership. All right, y'all. If this conversation has resonated with you, I want to personally invite you to my free virtual workshop, Step In, Step Back, Raising Sons Without Enabling Them. We're going to talk about when to lean out, when to create space, and how to lead without fear or overcorrection. The information, the link to join this free virtual workshop will be in the description box. All right, y'all. Until next time.